Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Prince Andrew's office says he ceased all contact with a man alleged to be a Chinese spy after taking advice from the government. There have been celebrations on the streets of Syria to mark the first Friday since the fall of President Assad. And the Chancellor says she is disappointed after the latest figures show the UK economy shrank in October. You are watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface, and the columnist and leader writer for The Times, Sebastian Payne. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Mail claims that Prince Andrew knew the man barred from entering the UK over concerns he was a Chinese spy for 10 years before he was told the man might be suspicious. The Times hears the man was invited to a reception at Buckingham Palace before he fell under suspicion. The Mirror calls the situation a China crisis. The Financial Times describes the latest GDP figures as a blow to the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. They show the economy shrank by 0.1% in October. The Express reports that the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has reacted to those figures by accusing Labour of crashing the economy. The Eye carries warnings about kitchen gadgets violating people's privacy, including air fryers recording conversations. And following Kemi Badenoch's rant about sandwiches, the Star says the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has stuck up for them. That's despite him once being part of an unflattering photo involving a bacon butty. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Sebastian Payne. Welcome to both of you. And I'll just give you a heads up that you're going to be doing the majority of the talking because, as you can hear, my voice is leaving me rapidly.
It's always a challenge for us.
I'm sure you'll manage. Let's start with the Mail. And the front page story headline there, Andrew has known China's spy for 10 years. Met him in 2012 and only dropped him after he was rumbled. I think they mean that the spy was rumbled. Alleged spy, we have to say. Susie.
Yeah. Just go back a little bit even before then. It was 2010 that the Duke of York was pictured walking in a Central Park in New York with convicted paedophile then, Jeffrey Epstein. It was a few months after that, in early 2011, he was asked to step down in his role as trade envoy. Into this, the alleged spy then seems to have somehow been introduced to Prince Andrew after all that. There's been a 10-year period in which they have socialised with each other and worked with each other, and he has been providing some kind of business advice and been a confidant of some sort to the Prince. And in 2019, after that disastrous Panorama interview, he stepped down from pitch at Palace, which was the sort of the business Dragon's Den type scheme he sort of set up for himself after he was asked to stop being a trade envoy because he was just too embarrassing. And everyone sort of let him get on with the pitch at Palace thing because it wasn't quite as bad. And it seems possible that this alleged spy was somehow involved offering advice or somehow or another with that scheme. But you know, it's now, that was 2019, and now we're on 2024, and it's taken this long, firstly, for the security services to find out this chap was someone they didn't want in the country, which is, they've got questions to ask, but also, even after 2019, the Prince was still inviting this person to his birthday party in 2020. He was arrested at the airport and had his phone seized by the security service in 2021. But it wasn't until a year later, in 2022, that the Prince finally said, oh, I've listened to advice now and I'm going to stop talking to him. There are a load of questions to be answered about who was doing what, when and why, what this chap was investing in, where the money was coming from and where it was going to, whether any of it ended up somewhere it shouldn't have done, and what the security services knew and what Andrew knew and when they all knew this, because there's so many holes in that timeline. I could just sit here and pull it apart all night.
Sebastian, uncharacteristically, because obviously Prince Andrew has sort of withdrawn from public life, he has released a statement and saying that he'd ceased all contact with this supposed spy after receiving advice from officials.
Yes, and you can see this on the front page of The Times tomorrow, where we're reporting that this alleged spy not only had his contacts, but had made visits to Buckingham Palace, St James's Palace and Windsor Castle for events, and including a birthday at the Royal Lodge for Prince Andrew as well. So the statement you mentioned that was released it doesn't really answer a lot of the questions Susie has just raised, because it doesn't say who raised the concerns, when these concerns were raised, and what concerns were raised.
And why they arrested him in 2021 and looked at his phone. What was the reason that made them think, hello, let's lift you?
And, I mean, you know, the statement goes on to say the Duke met with the individual through official channels with nothing of a sensitive nature ever discussed. He is unable to comment further on matters relating to national security. Now, I mean, that's all fine and dandy saying that, but the fact is this is once again absolutely appalling judgment by Prince Andrew that, as you mentioned, through the whole Jeffrey Epstein business, we saw that. We've seen it through many other relationships he's had over the years. And this one's just another embarrassment for the royal family. And the King has, I think, made quite clear his views on his brother and has sort of tried to excommunicate him. You know, he has. No, he has, as much as possible. And I think the question is what happens now. I would be very surprised to see if we see Prince Andrew walking on Christmas Day with the royal family to the traditional service, which he's still done, despite the fact he's not been a working royal for some time. But there's one other point on this story that's worth just considering, and that is the fact that how all this came to light, which was through court documents. And many campaigners for transparency of the royal family have been doing freedom of information requests for a long period of time and found out absolutely nothing about Prince Andrew's finances. And recently, you know, he had his personal allowance withdrawn by the King for the Royal Lodge at Windsor, and magically has somehow found the money to stay there. We don't know who. Who are the sources? Where's this money coming from? And I think this is going to just raise more and more questions about Prince Andrew's judgment, the people he's hanging around with, and the people, crucially, who've been giving him money.
His judgment, his house costs about £400,000 a year to run. Now, that'd be a lot of money for anybody. This man's been unemployed since 2019, at least, probably 2011. Anything he's actually had paid employment for, God knows when that last was. But what his sources of funding is when, after the Queen and now King have no longer funding him, has to be something that is a matter of public interest. Because although he's not part of royal public life anymore, as this scandal shows, he is easily capable of being tricked, fooled, used, exploited, however you want to call it, to let people who may have, you know, nefarious intent, let's say, close to people who do have the kind of secrets. Andrew certainly doesn't have any secrets, but people who do have access to government secrets that they could then get out of him. And one of the things that I think is going to move this story on next week is there was a line from the letter from the Prince's confidant, his advisor, which was quoted in the court case, saying, I want to this alleged spy, saying, I hope you are aware of how important you are and how high up the tree you are, not just for my principal, but for everyone in his family. So who else in the royal family has this person met? Who else did Prince Andrew introduce them to? Because the whole thing we saw with Jeffrey Epstein and some of the other people that Prince Andrew has met, even though it was innocently, like the Picture Palace, the reason they want to meet him is because he can introduce him to someone else.
But there is also, you've got to be very, there's a difference here between access and influence, right? That obviously Prince Andrew was a way for people to gain access into the royal family. That doesn't mean these people have influence, though. That doesn't mean that this alleged spy may have had influence over the now King, then Prince of Wales. They are quite different things there, and I think we should be careful not to overstate Prince Andrew's, you know, he's not an influential person in the royal family, hasn't been for quite a long time, even when this stuff was happening here. And that's what has to, where the story goes to next, is was there any links to other parts of the royal family? But
it doesn't really matter whether he's influential or not. If you've got someone who was spying for another country into Buckingham Palace, for anything. Then,
they-
who knows what kind of listening device he can pop in a vase?
Sure, OK.
There's plenty of things you can do if you are a spy.
We also have these things called security services that will also...
Who didn't spot him for 10 years?
Yeah, but they will do frequent security sweeps of all these places and will make sure that happens. Yeah. But I think, again, the reason they've gone for Prince Andrew is because they clearly saw that this was someone who could get them access, if not influence, into those circles. And on the front of the Times, Tom Tugendhat, who's the former security minister, has said this is the key thing to make sure it doesn't happen, is to understand access and influence and where the difference is there. But I think there are just lots and lots of questions that no one really has the answers to on any of this. But I think any remaining links that Prince Andrew has, I mentioned the walk to the church or any of the things, I think will now be done, completely finished. And if there was a way that the king could banish him even further from the royal family, I'm sure he could. But I think they've pretty much reached the limit of what he can do.
Tom Tugendhat also saying on the front of the Times that it's important there is an urgent investigation into attempts at subversion in Buckingham Palace, and that was the point that you were making, not necessarily influence, but...
All you've got to do is get in and have a chat to someone who works there, get talking to someone, bump into them somewhere else outside. There's all sorts of ways that you can establish relationships with someone inside a building that you wouldn't otherwise have access to.
The Mirror saying that the king is truly exasperated by his brother's latest scandal.
I mean, that does not seem a surprise in any way at all. And we should also put this in the context as well of the UK's relationship with China, which has waxed and waned over the period this alleged spies access took place. And the fact is we're on a kind of rapprochement moment with China, with Keir Starmer's government, trying to ease some of those relations and focus on trading ties. But this stuff seemed to have happened at the point when everyone was withdrawing in terms of access and influence to China. So you can see why they were using this person to try and get into the top of government.
Take us to the FT, Susie, and the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is disappointed at the latest figures, the economy shrinking 2 months in a row, teetering on the brink of recession.
Yeah. So it's we've had a decrease of economic growth of 0.1%, which is minuscule. So minuscule it could be mistaken for not existing or could be zero. It's close enough. Same as if you had growth of 0.1%. We'd all be sitting there going, well, what? Why do we care? But for the Conservatives, of course, this is something that they can... It's a negative number. It's got a little black line next to it. They can use that to kick the government and say it's all down to Rachel Reeves' budget. But as it makes really clear here in the piece, this shrinking has been going on for 5 months. And that means May. It means the last 2 months of the Tory government as well. And there's only been 1 month of growth since then. And, we've heard all this stuff previously about... there are some other papers this evening who are talking about, I think it's a piece in the Express that is talking about how it all went wrong when Labour came into power and they had big growth in the new year and it's all gone downhill and it was working so well under Rishi Sunak and all the rest of it. What no one seems to have pointed out is that this time last year, last winter, Sebastian, when the weather was this bad and we were all this miserable and everyone had, probably Gillian had a cold as well, we were then looking at 3 months of sustained shrinking in the economy, which was 0.3%, 3 times worse than what we've got now. And Rishi Sunak's government was calling it a technical recession. We don't need to worry about it. This is a third of that. It's not even a recession yet. And even if it is a recession, if it turns into that, it's still not going to be as bad as it was this time last year. So,
well, I think, OK, hang on a minute. First of all, last year, global inflation was in a very different place than it is now, and lots of countries were facing teetering on recession. So it's completely pointless to refer to last year. The key point is we've just had this dreadful budget, which was meant to be an expansionary budget, which should have pumped money into the economy. You don't have the biggest ever tax rise in budget and assume it will then tip your economy in the wrong direction.
But so this shrinkage preceded the budget, though, didn't it?
It did, because obviously, as Susie alluded to, that the question about where the UK's public finances are have sat for about 9 months now, about where, how you're going to get the economy moving. But I think what you are seeing with this budget is the fact that I don't think it's had the effect it was meant to have, that it was meant to come in and to give this brave wave of confidence. We heard the grown-ups are back in charge, the sensibles are going to sort it out. And the fact is they've come in, they've bunged up all these £40 billion of tax rises, and it's done absolutely nothing to business confidence. Businesses couldn't run away fast enough from this budget. So there is an effect here. Otherwise, why would Reuters be saying it's disappointing? You know, they're hoping things will pick up next year, and the OECD does say it expects the UK's growth to accelerate by 1.7% next year. But the big question on all this is Trump, right? Because what the UK does in this is relatively minor compared to, are we going to have a trade war? Are we going to see more tax cuts from Donald Trump? And that will have a big effect as well. And I mean, you can say it's absolutely nothing to do with the budget if you want, but I think everyone agrees that there's been a negative effect on business confidence. Like, every businessman will say that.
Everyone who can remember the last 5 minutes knows that all the previous budgets we've had recently, under governments of every stripe, have not exactly been wonderful, and that the Tories raised taxes hugely as well, that Truss's budget was hardly a kind of thing that made business delighted.
Susie.
And that they're talking here about, you know, talking down the economy, and we had boosterism, and that didn't work either.
Susie and Sebastian, we must leave it there. Not one more word. We've got to take a break. Do stay with us. Coming up, jubilant scenes across Syria as people there observed the first Friday prayers since the fall of the Assad regime. We'll be discussing that next. Stay with us.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Susie Boniface and Sebastian Payne. We're going to take a look at Syria, a remarkable case of Syria, the front page of the FT. And we'll kind of zoom in, I think, on the photo. And those are the people out in celebration at the downfall of Assad, naming it Victory Friday. Just amazing scenes that we've seen throughout the day.
Yeah, and one of the most astonishing things about it to me is that on the streets of Syria, you've seen women and wives and girls and children all out there celebrating with the men. When we've had other dictators toppled across the Middle East and other countries, it's been just the men out celebrating. In Syria, there's a lot of freedom. It's obviously a horrible, brutal dictatorship and there's loads of things they're not free to do. But women were able to go out in public without wearing a headscarf and to have some semblance of a life that had a level of equality about it. And I hope that the new regime, whatever it is and however they run the place, that doesn't alter. And that will be, I think, the test of whether they are still fundamentalist Islamists and to be worried about, or whether they are as genuinely the peace-loving, freedom fighters that they say they are.
Mm. And I think, we're seeing as well in the Times on their spread about what you're seeing that's coming out from the Assad regime, that we all knew it was one of the worst dictatorships of the 20th and 21st century, but some of the coverage just has been appalling when you look at the prisons, the mass graves, how people were detained, and also the wealth of Assad as well, like, the images of his car garage, of his presidential palace. And I think there's sort of this big question mark about the future, and you see that with this question about what's going to happen in terms of Israel, the fact they're establishing this buffer zone, as they're describing it, within Syria, which seems to which some claim violates the 1974 armistice agreement. But I think the real question is what comes next. No one knows, and I think there's a lot of sort of wait and see from the West with regards to HTS, which is the force that is prescribed by the UK and the US, and what they're going to do next and how hardline they are.
It's about whether they can hold it as well, because there's so many other forces in Syria.
Yeah.
There's the Hezbollah in Lebanon, there's Iran. Obviously, they're both weakened, but you've got the Kurdish People's Party, you've got Turkish influences there, you've got Islamic State from within. If they've taken over, because Assad was very, very weak, then that's one thing, but can they hold it against all those other internal forces that are going to be trying to seize power as well?
Indeed, and will the minorities be ruled over fairly, Christians as well, Alawites, etc. Susie and Sebastian, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a look at the weather for you now. After quite a cold and grey week, the weather will turn milder but more unsettled through the weekend. For most, it's a cloudy, murky and damp evening with outbreaks of rain and drizzle, but a band of rain is pushing in from the northwest, introducing clearer skies. This rain band will continue to move south overnight, reaching central parts of Wales and the Midlands. Clear skies and scattered blustery showers will follow in the north, some wintry with a risk of icy stretches. Meanwhile, it stays cloudy and damp for southern Britain. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, Prince Andrew's office says he ceased all contact with a man alleged to be a Chinese spy after taking advice from the government.